one of the things that I'm keeping a close eye on here, let me get rid of that there. But basically, there's a chance that we could be making a head and shoulders pattern on Bitcoin here. I'm going to change the color of the neckline here so it's a little bit more obvious. But just to do, so you can clearly see shoulder, head, and then this kind of wick today really helped make that shoulder potentially to the upside. So if we were to curve down and eventually break the 24.8, 24.9 level, this neckline, I'm just curious about this. I don't know what the target would be, but we can calculate it out really quickly. Try that plumb line down. So it'd be basically a $7,000 drop from the high there to the neckline, and you'd replicate that out here, and right around basically right there. So yeah, you'd be looking at 18K. Wow. So that would, again, and there's no, it doesn't have to play out that way, meaning you don't have to make the shoulder here, but it is a pattern that I'm keeping an eye on now. It is showing us that you have the lower high for this shoulder, the lower high for this shoulder. And again, if it breaks that neckline, it's game on to the downside potentially. So yeah, kind of crazy, man. It's definitely caught me off a little guard. The other thing I and again, this is just speculation on my part, but we did see kind of a little bit of a move up last night. And it's like, you can't help but wonder, whoever released this fake news, they probably were buying Bitcoin ahead of this, right? I mean, if you were going to release it, you're not going to release it and be like, oh, I'm not going to try to make money off of it. And so you have to wonder if the upticking on Sunday night was someone buying ahead of this news, and then they just dumped into it. And kind of shady, man. We had this kind of little upticking going into today. And what I kind of think about this, right? So a couple of views, and we were kind of discussing this before, is like, if you're Gary Gensler and you're like, yeah, we need to approve something like this eventually, today's price action on fake news. And for those of you that may not know, if you live in the bubble, right, or outside of the bubble, basically there was fake news that the ETFs had been approved. The price ripped up to 30,000, and then obviously has collapsed back down as it was fake news that was released. And again, going back to what Gary Gensler, I mean, if you're Gary Gensler and you're looking at this, here's a $500 billion market cap Bitcoin, and it just moved, what do you say, 7%, Ben? Something like that on fake news. The spot ETF would be something that stock people could trade. It would be traded on the New York Stock Exchange or the NASDAQ. And it as a spot ETF, they would have to hold Bitcoin in that ETF. But if you're buying the ETF, you don't own, I mean, technically you don't have the control over those Bitcoins. So that's the idea behind it.
It's kind of like with the gold ETF. I mean, there's a lot of like gold bugs that would scoff at the idea of ever buying into like a gold ETF, right? It's like you buy the underlying asset. That's the point of it. It's the same idea with Bitcoin. Again, I'm not really commenting on whether it's bullish or bearish. I think it's going to depend on where we are in the cycle, but I think that's just sort of a point we should note.
Yeah, and by the way, just for the record, that's a great point on the gold ETFs. I mean, same kind of deal. It's not your technically gold. It's staffed somewhere else. They're holding it somewhere else. And for me, and I can speak from my personal nature, is that, I do hold some physical, but then I also I hold physical gold and silver and some of these other metals because it's a insurance policy. If I wake up and God forbid the economy has collapsed and there's chaos in the streets, I have that, right? But ultimately for investing purposes and for, shorter term movements, it's very hard to go buy and sell gold quickly, like if it's physical versus the GLD, which you can just go on the exchange and boom, done exiting if you need to exit. So I think there's a case for both, right? I mean, as an investment, the ETF makes a lot of sense. For a lot of people in this world, that's going to be the place they do it. And then for other people that do believe in, not your keys, not your coin, right? I mean, that's going to be where they're going to want to hold them themselves. Folks, for those of you out there, what this tells us, and this gave us kind of an inside view of what will happen when an ETF is really approved, right? Money is going to rush into Bitcoin, and it's, maybe the sympathy play is to get the altcoins a little bit of a bid. But this clearly shows that when people thought this news was real, the pop in Bitcoin dominance was substantial. And again, I think that just proves that Bitcoin dominance will go higher because the money concentration based on a spot ETF, it's going to bring in a lot of new money into Bitcoin, like that people that don't want to have a crypto account. They just want to have their stock in portfolio. And that's the money that's going to drive Bitcoin dominance probably higher.
Bitcoin went on a wild ride, jumping 10% and nearly touching $30,000. But it wasn't due to an ETF approval as first thought. A mistaken report that BlackRock had secured an ETF launch swiftly sent Bitcoin surging to $30,002 on Monday, only for the excitement to cool when BlackRock clarified that their application was still under review. This roller coaster reflects the impact that a looming decision from the U.S. Securities and Exchange Commission, SEC, regarding Bitcoin exchange-traded funds ETFs could have on the crypto market. Around a dozen firms, including BlackRock, are eager to offer the first U.S. spot Bitcoin ETFs, and many believe that the SEC may finally embrace these products. If approved, these ETFs could drive wider adoption of cryptocurrencies. Bitcoin's recent jump provides a glimpse of what might happen if these ETFs get the green light. Bloomberg Intelligence ETF analyst James Seifert predicts that a batch of spot Bitcoin ETFs could be approved by a January deadline. $95 million of Bitcoin positions were liquidated in 24 hours as hope for ETFs sparked interest. The SEC has been cautious about spot Bitcoin ETFs due to fraud and manipulation concerns. The future and impact of spot ETH approvals remain uncertain. The SEC has been cautious about the crypto sector this year and has consistently rejected spot Bitcoin ETFs due to concerns about fraud and manipulation in the token spot market. However, they have permitted ETFs holding Bitcoin and other futures. The debate over when spot ETFs will gain approval remains unresolved. While approvals could potentially drive Bitcoin to around $32,000, the timing and exact impact are uncertain. A move above previous range highs might not happen immediately. As of 6:42 a.m. in London on Tuesday, Bitcoin was trading at $28,180, showing a 1% dip. Smaller tokens like Ether and Dogecoin also experienced minor movements. Although Bitcoin has risen by 70% this year, it remains well below its 2021 peak of nearly $69,000. Reports of a spot Bitcoin ETF approval by the SEC sent Bitcoin to nearly $30,000. But the news wasn't confirmed and Bitcoin retraced to around $28,000. Let's continue our enlightening discussion with Gareth Soloway.
I just think like today's a day where you have to just step back from crypto and say, number one, Bitcoin again proves that it's really the main game in town. And number two is that, it's still an asset that is, I was saying this on my live trading room today where I was day trading stocks mainly, but we actually did trade BITO. When Bitcoin collapsed back down, we bought on the Pierce of 28,000 BITO, which is the futures ETF. And we actually made some nice money. I mean, the volatility was just great, but it just goes back to the crypto market to me is like the penny stock market in the 1980s when you had Wolf of Wall Street, you had, the movie Boiler Room. If anyone hasn't seen that, it's one of the great movies that's kind of underappreciated, but it shows you what that was like, the shadiness that was going on in the industry at that time. And it's really like fast forward this many years, basically 40 years, and that's the crypto markets at this point. I want to talk briefly about gold because I think last time when we were on this stream, when we were doing this, gold was at this low end and there were so many people panicking. And one thing I just want to impress upon everyone is that, emotion is your worst friend. It's the evil that will make you do the wrong thing at the wrong time. And so what you saw here is that you had gold down like 9 days in a row, but you had this parallel channel, this line to this line, and you were just into that there, and you had this pivot low. And so as a technician, this is what I've trained myself to do, and it's taken decades, but is you don't allow 9 straight down days to make you worried because you focus on the support. And as long as we were holding that support, this thing was fine. And what we can see is that was a great flush out of weak hands on gold. Gold then reversed and actually closed above the channel and is now beginning what I would think is bullish consolidation over the next few days. And so to me, gold again continues to shine here. If you look at, again, the relative strength of the US dollar, the break here, I think by end of year, we're probably testing this all-time high again. And I would just point this out again. And we talked about, a potential head and shoulders on Bitcoin that maybe is forming. But did you guys see there's a kind of an inverse head and shoulders here on gold, which is fascinating to see a head and shoulders and then potentially an inverse. But essentially, you could make a case that you have this. If this heads back up, you have a shoulder, head and shoulder, and your price target here is about 24 to 2,500 in 2024. So just an interesting little price action. I love showing charts where it whips out people because it shows how emotion, again, is your worst friend. And it's just focus on the facts, the logic, and that's really, I think that's something you do better all the time is you don't seem like when you're investing, you're really getting emotional. You're just like, dude, this is what the data says. That's what I'm going to go with.
That wraps up today's crypto news highlights. Stay tuned for more updates, insights, and analysis from the world of cryptocurrencies. Please share your thoughts in the comments below. Don't forget to like this video and subscribe to our channel for more engaging content.